Welcome to the GCN Tech Clinic, where Alex and I aim to answer your bike tech maintenance related questions. As ever, you can submit your questions down below in the comments section using the hashtag AskGCNTech, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as possible
within the allotted time.
Let's go.
First one, Christian J. Berry. They say multiple surface tyre pressure. Hi, I'm doing the Flandrian Challenge in early July. I'll be riding a Ridley Canzo Fast with 35mm gravel slicks. Knowing the route is a mix of cobbled sections and paved roads, using the Silka tyre pressure calculator, should I choose a pressure based on the cobbled settings, choose a pressure for the smooth roads, or compromise and go with something in between?
Right. So, if you were approaching this from the perspective of doing, let's say, an individual time trial across mixed surfaces, the best thing to do would be to analyse what proportion of the surface is cobbled and what proportion of the surface is tarmac. And you will find that probably even on the Flandrian Challenge, probably something like 95% of it is tarmac and smooth roads. In which case, you stand to gain far more by having tyre pressures that are optimised for the smoother road sections than the cobbled sections. The other thing to factor in is, but the cobbled sections do become sort of significant. Now, in a racing situation, the cobbled sections are far more significant than the tarmac sections, and you probably lose a lot more on the cobbled sections proportionally, and we know this from doing these like tyre pressure studies on the cobbled sections at Silverstone. You can lose a lot more watts on the cobbled sections than you do by having a non-optimal pressure on the tarmac sections. So I would say that it's probably better to go somewhere in between. Yeah. Because you won't, by having less pressure in your tyres, you might only lose a little, a couple of watts on the tarmac, but you will gain a lot back on the cobbled sections and have more grip. If you wanted to go full nerd on this, you would work out the difference in speed between the cobbled sectors with the tyre pressure optimised or not optimised, and the same on the road, and then figure out the differences accumulatively across the event. Yeah. I'm going to throw it out there and say that's probably more complicated and consuming more time than most people have got. Yeah. And the other thing is, that the cobbles in the Flandrian Challenge aren't actually that severe. Okay. So a lot of the Flemish, cobbles that are used in the Tour of Flanders, they're not that bad, compared to like the Paris-Roubaix cobbles. And so it's not that bad. And there's not a huge amount of crazy descent cobbles in there either, where grip is more of a problem. I would definitely just go somewhere in the middle and tweak it depending on what your kind of priorities are. Yeah. Plus, it's so long riding that you'll get an idea. You'll do the first few sort of Bergen, and you will get an idea of how that sort of feels, and you can tweak it and adjust your pressure a bit and lower your pressure if you fancy that. The easiest way to do that? To peak digital inflator. You like that? Right, over to you. Come on. Crikey Bikey next, saying, I'm upgrading from stock drop bars on my gravel bike. I'm trying to decide between round or aero. Do aero-shaped drop bars really make a difference? I mainly use my bike for commuting 15 kilometres to work, and so I'm interested in speed, and I'd want to do this faster. I also do some mild off-roading through forests too, so I'm interested in comfort. Also, is it worth spending 3 times more on carbon over alloy? Can I dive in here first? You dive right in. Oh, that's very kind of you. Firstly, the thing that is going to make the biggest difference to speed in terms of your handlebars is getting your body position set correctly first. Yep. That's your first priority. Get your body position dialed in. Then look at your options you're trying to choose from, be that the aero shape on the tops or the round ones. If you're talking about speed and comfort, I'm going to throw it out there that an aerodynamic profile top to the handlebars is not only marginally faster, it's also more comfortable when you're riding on the tops because you've got a larger surface area for your house. I disagree with that. I prefer, for riding on the tops, a nice round shape, blooming great. So my theory is that the broad up surface area on the top helps to spread the
the loadout on your hand, but
some do,
preference.
but they're so different. They vary so much. Some of the bladed top sections on some handlebars I actually find really uncomfortable.
Okay, I take your point. Then in terms of carbon over alloy, I think that's purely, I would say, purely down to the amount of money that you want to spend. Yes, I've got carbon handlebars on nearly all of my bikes, but you can get very, very similar performance from an alloy handlebar.
In terms of when we talk about bang for buck in terms of performance, carbon or alloy handlebar is one of the going to carbon is one of the least cost effective bang for buck upgrades you can make. Both in terms of just in terms of weight and aero and everything. You like.
Get the alloy bar, spend your cash on some other upgrades if that's what you want to do.
I mean, I would say that in terms of if you're wanting to commute a little bit faster and improve your aerodynamics and all the rest of it, then your position on the bike makes the most difference, your clothing makes the most difference, and having a little bladed section on your bar makes less difference. The round bar as well is far more practical for commuting because it's far easier to stick things to the bar. So if you need to stick lights on, for example, or other accessories or whatever it is, bell, whatever.
That's actually a great bit of advice.
It's just way more practical.
Yeah, I'm annoyed I missed that bit. That's great. Okay, cool. Grimalorkina 3586.
Grimalorkina.
Yes. Hello,
I think it was right.
Hello, GCNTech. Recently, I've noticed more and more often when a wheelset comes with two wheels in different rim heights. For example, Fulcrum sells a 40 and 57 wheels. Is this a worthwhile system? Firstly, I'm going to throw it out there and say, from a personal perspective, I don't like having a deeper rim at the front and a shallower rim.
Purely aesthetics.
I just don't like the aesthetics of it.
I agree. I prefer like having
equal
on front and back.
So
I just like the look of it, and that's based purely on whimsical appearances. It's not based on any science.
In terms of is it a worthwhile system? Well, firstly, I think we should explain the reason why that exists. So the idea and theory behind it, slightly deeper wheel in the back to try to optimize for aerodynamics a little bit more, and the back of the bike is less affected in terms of stability from crosswinds. Idea at the front is that you've got the slightly shallower rim to help the bike remain stable should the wind blow from the side.
Yeah, because the front wheel can pivot off the steering axis, so it can make the bike less stable. Zip, actually, I believe, were the first people to do this. I might be wrong on that, but this is going back a long time now. To like 2010 or something.
Yeah.
They brought out a wheel set which they called the Zip 606. Which they sold in combination a 404 front and an 808 rear. And so 606. And so that was the idea there. But other brands have done it. Envy typically do have, for a long time, have had slightly deeper rear and all the rest of it. And it does make sense.
Well, basically, you've got all the options you could possibly think of because you've got brands doing equal depth rims, brands doing deeper rear, shallower front, and then you've got brands doing rims that alternate in height profile as well. So take your pick, and at the end of the day, they're all offering a very similar style of performance.
And if you fancy it, go for it.
Yeah, there you go.
It does make sense.
Over to you.
Vite Pain Velo, or Vite Pain Velo, maybe it's a fast-bred bike, says, I have a road bike with a 5236 chainring and upgraded to an 1132 cassette, but I'm struggling up long climbs. Can I just change the inner ring and the front to a 34? Is there a problem with a bigger gap going 5234? Is this your job best left to the local bike shop? Would existing chain be okay as the largest combination hasn't changed? Blah, 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 blah. Right, it can work. I've done it. I have swapped that and I've made that thing. I've even run a 53 chainring with a 34 inner chainring.
Very naughty.
Pros have done that as well in races. You can make it work, but that big gap, as you point out, between having a big jump between the big chainring and little chainring can cause shifting problems. Shimano doesn't advise for it, and it can mean that you can drop your chain.
Yeah.
And so you have to be careful when shifting between the big and small chain.
In terms of their, is it best left to the local bike shop? It's a job that if you're relatively hands-on and practical with your bike, you could do that pretty easily. And in terms of the chain length, Yes, it's not going to have an impact in terms of the big chainring and the larger sprockets at the back, but what you might find is when you use that smaller chainring at the front, and if you end up towards the bottom of the cassette and the smaller sprockets, you might find the chain's a little bit saggy and a little bit long.
Yeah, or I can understand why someone might still want the 52 chainring, because they want the, they want that bigger gear for when they're going really fast. I understand that.
Or upgrade the cassette.
But you could upgrade the cassette.
Yeah.
So you could get I think that would be a better option to go to a 34 on the cassette, or even a 36 possible, and then you can you run a different rear derailleur, like you could run a GRX derailleur that can accommodate bigger gears at the back, or another hack people did with longer cage rear derailleurs is they put the old wolf tooth adapters on there to extend the rear mech. So you can do that as well. There's a few ways around that problem.
I'm with you though. I think I would approach this problem from looking at it as a cassette change rather than mismatched chainring. So that would be a better route.
But if you are struggling on the climbs, going easier gears is the way to go.
Yeah. Julio 1967, they say, why do I get 3 dramatically different results from 3 different tyre pressure calculators, brackets, SRAM, Silca, Vittoria, when inputting identical data? One of them recommends a pressure too low, even on my clinchers. Thanks very much. Keep up the great work. Now, I actually picked this out because I replied to this comment underneath the text. And what I said, essentially, you've got a difference here of some of these calculators are using some assumptions rather than having you put every single possible bit of information in. Some could be using a tyre data and like written sidewall width rather than physically measuring it. And between the 3 of them, they could be trying to solve the equation and aiming for a different outcome. Like the Silca tyre pressure calculator, for example, typically solves and prioritises for speed over comfort, whereas others might prioritise comfort slightly over speed. So you're going to get a slightly different tyre pressure. Yeah.
I think the other thing to point out is like the Vittoria one will have been specifically done for their tyres.
Yeah.
And whereas the Silca one is more generalised towards tyres, it's not for like a specific brand. And similarly, the SRAM one is also factoring in their product, so zip tyres and wheels.
Yeah.
And so there's also a factor there which is not in the calculator, but it has to take into account the fact that a lot of their wheels are hookless.
Yeah.
And so with hookless, that's a whole nother thing that you have to factor into your tyre pressure, which will impact it, because you can't go, too high on a hookless rim because you'll blow the tyre off the rim. So, that's just, I think they're the things that you've got to sort of read between the lines and factor in those different things from those different sources. But I think the Silca one, big fan of that, and I've used the Vittoria one, which is pretty cool as well. I think they've gone to town on the gravel side of it with different types of gravel, which is pretty useful, I think.
Okay, fair. Well, as with all tyre pressure things, it's about getting a starting point and tweaking it to what suits you, really.
Yeah.
You're going to have to help me out with this username here. I don't want to murder it.
Donny Yorbek Turganov.
Thanks. There you go.
He said how to prevent Alex's elbow from constant scratches.
Wear elbow pads is the first thing you do.
The question is, how can we make aero bikes like a Canyon Ultimate? This is the proper question.
Yeah.
How can we make aero bikes more comfortable and bring them close to all-rounders? Please exclude top tier like Pinarellos, Trek, S-Works, Flagship, all-in-one models as examples.
Well, I think firstly I want to say, if you're talking about aero bikes, I'm presuming they meant to say the Canyon Aero, not the Ultimate, because that's their aero bike.
Yeah.
So, first thing I would do for any bike, if I wanted to improve comfort, firstly, make sure the bike fits you correctly. But I think that's a given. I think what they're talking about is in terms of product kind of thing, is just put the widest tyres you can fit into your bike and run them at a slightly lower pressure, and that's going to increase your comfort on the bike. That's the simplest thing I think you could do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tyre pressure is like tyre pressure and size is the single biggest thing.
I got told an interesting fact once, and I'm sure I've put it in some of the tyre videos we've made over the years, is that you can change the compliance of your bike in a far, far greater detail from tyre pressure and tyre size than you could ever achieve through frame
Carbon
design
layout.
and construction and stuff like that. So, yeah. Obviously, the bike does have a big impact on it, but your tyre pressures are always going to be the overriding thing.
I remember it's a couple of years ago now, we rode the old like Pinarellos, the different generations of Pinarello Dogmas, right? And I remember that the 65.1 Think bike, which is the one that Brad won the tour on. It was his bike, and it had all that wavy shapes on it and stuff. That was a really comfortable bike.
Yeah.
But then when they switched the next year to the F8, which was the first sort of generation of the sort of Aero,
The F bikes.
I was taken aback with how riding them back to back, how stiff and uncomfortable that was.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, but then what's amazing is then when you ride the modern ones, how you can see back to back like how modern aero bikes have become a lot more comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's it now. We're at a point where they kind of, when they first made those aero tube shapes and they didn't understand the carbon layups as much, those initial aero bikes were very stiff and unforgiving. But now they're all pretty good.
Yeah.
Like they're all they've made it as comfortable, a lot more comfortable. And now you're right. It is tyres is the
100%.
biggest difference.
Okay, right. Last question for this week. It's from Shamandra Sakthival.
Nailed it.
Yeah, they say, what are your thoughts on running sealant inside TPU tubes? Will you get the puncture sealing capabilities of tubeless without the mess it creates? Will it be slower than running plain tubes? Will it even work? So, a few questions here. My thoughts on running sealant inside TPU tubes are, it could potentially work, but I've never actually tried it myself, so I don't actually know the answer to that. Will you get the sealing capabilities of tubeless without the mess? In theory, but again, I actually want to test it. Is it going to be slower? Almost certainly, I think it's going to be slightly slower than not having the sealant in there. And, well, there's my thoughts on it, basically.
I think it will, based on bicyclerollingresistance.com data where they showed that the amount of sealant that you put in a tyre does actually impact the rolling resistance.
Yeah.
I think it is going to be ever so slightly slower. That stands to reason, but we haven't tested it. And I haven't seen any specific data on that, but it does stand to reason it will be slightly slower. The other thing is that there's a slight safety element I think you should point out, which is that, okay, if you're running a tubeless tyre and you then have a TPU tube inside it and then you have sealant inside that, then that kind of could work and the tubeless system could sort of in theory take over once the TPU tube fails. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But you've then got issues of the valve is not sealed. So you've not got a tubeless valve in, which has an airtight thing.
Oh, okay, yeah. Then it's going to just leak everywhere into the wheel cavity.
Yeah, and you've also got the problem of if you're not using a tubeless tyre, if you're using a standard clincher tyre, you've got a safety element then. Because you've got a non-tubeless tyre that's set up on a tubeless rim, or maybe even not a tubeless rim, and you're trying to turn it into a tubeless system. So
there's a lot of if, buts, and maybes.
Yeah. So in general, I just wouldn't recommend it.
It's got me thinking though. I feel like I want to explore the idea of it.
I have tried it.
Okay.
Like I have tried putting sealant inside inner tubes before and seeing if they do seal. And when I bench tested it, like if you with like using a thumbtack for Americans or drawing pin, it does seal. That's that type little thing. It can work and it can seal. So it can stop a few things. But yeah, I'm going to say don't do it.
Yeah. Thumbtack in French?
I don't know what a thumbtack is in French.
It disappointed me. Right.
Find out though. I'm interested.
While Ollie Googles that. There you go. Hope we've answered your questions. As always, I apologise if we haven't got to your question, but please do be persistent. Put it in the comment section down below and we'll get to it in the coming weeks. And thumbtack in French is?
Punaise.
Fantastic. Rave. See ya.